Like leveling up by the bottom is never a good thing, right? And we all know that's what happened. Like there's some famous French songs from Georges Brassens. I'm not going to quote, but basically says like if you're more than a certain number, you're just a bunch of assholes. Translated in French, but there's truth in that, right? There's truth in like at some point, the more people you are, the dumber thing you're going to do. You put a bunch of people in a room, they're going to start doing dumb things, right? That's just who we are, right? And what we always say is that the weakest link is what basically level the whole team, right? If you have a weak link, that's the best you can do. So in products, it makes it a little bit tricky because
I'm your host, Ruthvan, author of the book Data Impact. Welcome to Slasog, Leaders or Readers. Here I speak with outstanding operators and seminal thinkers to unpack first principle system rethink for data-driven value creation. Hi, Nicola. Welcome to Slasog, Leaders or Readers. I'm so happy to have you here. And you're the first product leader on the pod, so I'm especially excited to speak with you. So welcome.
Hey, Ritavan. Nice to meet you again. Yeah, very excited to have this conversation. Really enjoyed reading the book this summer, so looking forward to the conversation for sure.
Yeah, to kick this off, let me just say, for anyone watching this or listening to us, if they don't know who you are and what you do, what would you tell them about, why they should listen to us chatting today?
All right. Not sure why they should listen to us, but I can try there. Like who I am. So I'm French. To start with the basics, I'm French, married, kids, living now in Barcelona. I've been living across Europe for a while now, in different countries. You and I had a chance to work together back in the day at Clark in Germany for a very short time. That's where we met each other. What I do, I would describe myself as a product and tech leader. I've been doing that for about 25 years now. In many different industries. I started with mapping and location businesses at the beginning of digital mapping in the algorithmic navigation, ended up building with my team the first big data platform for connected cars back in the day using machine learning at that time before all the crave around AI. So maybe we'll talk about that. But I also I work in automotive, I work in fintech, in insurtech. That's where we work together at Clark. Music tech for almost 10 years, health, climate change, and recently for the last 3 years in the maritime sector on everything, every software that is used for managing ships, managing crews. Very new industry for me, and that's what I like. I like to jump from one industry to another and owning my craft around it. So that's what I do, and I think what I like to do, and where hopefully I'm getting better at, I'm kind of not too bad at, is definitely around creating together with a team ambitious product vision, a little bit like big strategic changes, creating a collaborative leadership, and then having really a purpose-led technology, using technology for the greater good. And we discussed a bit about that. I think the older you get and the more gray hair you have, the more you want to, you're not fancying the next fancy logo, but you're craving doing something for good, doing something that makes sense, that has an impact. And I think in maritime, technology can really help in the big transformation that is going on around sustainability and new fuels, but also better condition for the crews and all that. So I think that's me in a nutshell. I like to think that I help building product for people, with people, and I leverage technology for that.
Yeah, no, I think I'm excited to speak with you because you've worked across a whole bunch of sectors, and this is something that I really admire and sort of, aspire to myself, because I think you start seeing patterns that someone who's just been in one industry doesn't see. And all the different, sort of sectors and industries you worked in are all relatively traditional. What I mean by that is they have some physical hardware industrial component, which is a bit like, what Slasog is about, and the core of, of the conversation and the value we try to bring. And so, to get a little more provocative, right, given what you're seeing both in the product function, but also across industries, what's your fundamental disagreement with the status quo? Like what's your take, and where are you contrarian with respect to what you see? Right?
Yeah. So maybe I guess I have a take on a lot of things, but maybe one thing, the first thing that pops into my head when you say that is like, there's a sentence I hate, and I've heard it in every single industry. It's like, we tried that before, right? It's like we all, or the other one, the little sister of this one is like, but we always have done it like that. And I'm not the guy who's going to say if something works like don't break it, like don't touch it. That's fine. There are certain things you need to let them be. There are even certain things I believe strongly. There's something you need to let them rot, and you need to go through the process of pain and all that. But I can't fathom the idea that because you tried or because you've done it one way all the time, then we should do it, right? For me, it always reminds me of these. If you ask, if you you know these very famous quote, you say like, if you ask people what they want at that time, they will tell you faster horse, and that's not what they want. What they want is a car, right? So I think that's the whole thing that for me is annoying, is like being stuck in the same old good old way of doing things. And you're right. I've been working in pretty traditional industries, and what you see, like the winner in this type of industry are the people who are ready to work from first principle and ask the why. So when someone is telling me, but that's the way we've always been doing it, I'm like, okay, why? And if the only answer they can say is because we've always done it, that it's as empty an answer as possible. And generally, the people you're talking with is just realizing themselves, okay, it's a little bit of a dumb answer. Like the answer to the why is because we always done it like that. It's a little bit like why because, right? It goes nowhere. So I think that's probably where having worked in different industry, you're absolutely right. You bring this open mindedness and you bring this experience that you have gathered from other industry. Doesn't mean you bring a playbook. Doesn't mean what apply in one industry will apply in another. The same way what apply in one company in an industry is going to apply to the next one. I mean, the copycats doesn't work. There's no playbook, and I think there's less and less playbook. But it means you have tried a few things before. You have ideas, so you come with an inventory of tools, of experience, and things that you can leverage to accelerate and to discover. And I think that's a little bit maybe what makes me slightly different to this traditional industry, or at least trying to transform them in a little bit more innovative way, to a certain point.
Yeah, no, I think what you just shared made me think about, and also you're also the first Frenchman on the pod, so I have to bring this up. It's come up in other contexts, but it makes me think about not taking dogma along and thinking from first principles. And the way you see that, the place where you see that in the most brutal ways in military strategy. And I wrote about how Napoleon was successful, and I kind of analyzed his campaign because I was curious, like he's crazy how he had success rates of 80+% against whoever he fought. And I've always thought I attributed it to his genius, and then I realized a lot of the other people he was standing up to were actually stupid. I think it's a mix of both. And what you described is exactly the same thing. The Austrians would keep going into battle, and the Prussians and the Russians with the same old dogma and the same old techniques.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have this guy who's essentially emerging, from France, startup nation of sorts, right? Because of the French Revolution, everything had got destroyed, and so everything was getting rebuilt. And he had the courage to think from first principles, right? As far as tact and strategy is concerned, right? I'm not speaking about all the other, political, social elements,
Yeah.
but just in terms of how you approach the battlefield. And a competitive market is like a battlefield, and I think in that sense, thinking from first principles and throwing away dogma is like so important.
No, absolutely. And I think it's also humility, to a certain extent, is just remain humble and just try things out. Like acknowledge the fact that you don't know everything. And maybe it's easier when you don't come from this industry. Like you don't know nothing, right? I came to maritime 3 years ago. I didn't know crap about it, didn't know anything. So I had to work from first principle and I think forcing you to do that shapes your mindset. So I think you're absolutely right. Someone who has been, whatever your job is, but if you have been moving around different country, different type of company, different industry, you have this adaptability, and you have this openness and open-mindedness that doesn't necessarily exist if you've been doing the same thing all at the same time. You optimize for a different thing, right? If you're doing the same thing the same way, you optimize for another metrics that the one you would if you're in the mentality of trying to find a better answer to the same problem.
Yeah, in fact, just structurally, right? If you're changing, you're forced to think in a new way because there is nothing else you can, So
Exactly.
any of the old dogma is not going to work. So you're forced, like you don't even have a choice. You're forced to do it.
No, absolutely. And it's getting, if anything, it's just going to accelerate, as we all know, right? It's just like, it's just going to accelerate. And the only thing that is permanent is change. And if that's part of your first principle, saying like, okay, the only thing that is true is like, there's always going to be change. If you're not ready to take a new approach to the same problem, you're missing the point. So fair, absolutely fair point what you were saying. And And it's good to be reminded about that. And maybe that's a trigger, right? So it's always the chicken and egg. Like, are you changing industry because you have this capacity of working for first principle, or are you working for first principle because of your history and your experience? It doesn't matter at the end. I believe it's the right approach. So wherever it was born from, I'm fine. It's okay.
Yeah, no, totally. Just to kind of take a step back now and sort of understand, how you became who you are. Like, if you can give sort of a, your origin story and your life story in
Yeah,
brief, and especially the moments, like a couple of pivotal moments, like, or environments that shaped you. Like for me, it was dinner table conversations growing up at home. So for you, might be something else. So if you can give
yeah.
a bit, like a feel for that.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely happy to do that. Very relevant. So I come from what I would say a working French family. So my mom working at the factory since she was 16, and my dad started as a teacher and then went into being a bank clerk, and then from there went all his way up and up to CFO in a small company. So I would say why it is important is because it gave me a certain set of values. So I've seen different things. I've seen both my parents working hard, and my mom always been behind my brother and I when it comes to studies. So she's the one who actually helped us go through study and all that. I was a bit lazy. I could have spent my time doing something else, but she was there and she pushed us. And I have this image of my father being somewhere else at work, right? He was not so present in the family during the week. He was working a lot and all that. So pretty traditional to a certain way. But I think what it put into me and my older brother is this idea that works pays off. Like if you really work, it's going to pay off. And the other thing is that my mom has had limited pleasure at work, like factory work, not super interesting. But my father brought us back this culture of like, you can actually enjoy your colleagues, you can actually enjoy work, you can take risks. And that's a little bit the difference between, to a certain extent, entrepreneurship and this career ambition as compared to something more stable. And I think it's fair. And I think it's because they had different level of ambition and different thing in life. And I'm very grateful for my mom to have spent so much time educating us. And it paid off. So that's the kind of the framework. Funny enough, I think one thing that I realized is that I had a very non-international upbringing. So very like Normandy, northwest of France. We were not traveling. We didn't have the means, or it was not even a thing. So I went out of France for the first time, I think, with school when I was like 16 or 17 or something like that, right? So very very grounded. And now I'm the complete opposite, like very international family. We live all around the world. So probably a reaction to that. And I think yeah, dinner table, same thing. I think it's a traditional French things. Like the dinner table is the conversation at the dinner table is always important. The meal is just a it's just an excuse for having chats. And I encode that in my current family. We do that. If there's a meal we're gonna have, it's gonna be dinner, and we're gonna have a chat around that. So definitely something that that marked me in terms of very important moment in life. Beyond that, I would say beyond the one I just described. Unfortunately, my father passed away when he was fairly young. Right, I was 23, he was 47, and he passed away on his desk, working.
At work.
Yeah, at work. Literally, right? No pain, no drama, nothing. It's just an aneurysm, and it just died there on his desk, working. So I think that leaves a mark, and that forced you to make sure that I'm very passionate about what I do, but I always that in the back of my mind is like there's more to life than work.
Hmm.
So when it's an interesting question, when everybody tried to ask me like, how do you define yourself? I try to avoid talking about my job, because that's what people think naturally is like, what is important for you? And it's your job. Like, it's like, who are you? I'm the CEO, CTO, whatever it is. No, I'm a father first and foremost, right? That was I have 3 kids, and that's what I am. And then I happen to work and I enjoy it. And I realize that I think the core of everything is people. And I think that's been the journey I've been in. It's just like the core for me is people, right? So that's why I'm a people leader. I like to think that product is about working with people to build something for people. So it all boils down to people. And I think that's an important that's an important reminder for me. A couple of things that people are important. Life is short. Give it your best, and ultimately, yeah, work is important. But what is the most important work is definitely the impact you're going to have, but it's also the people you're going to meet and the people you're going to work with. You're always going to cross people several times, so that's a good reminder to just. At the end, we are human. We're social animal. People is the most important part. So that's what I've learned. So it's a pretty long answer, but I think this really marked me, this loss. And then I think most of the other big moments, of course, is the child, the birth of your child and all children, and then on a professional basis, I would say it's just this. I've been extremely lucky, and I'm very grateful to have worked in so many industries and discovered so many industries and learned so much, and being given a chance to continue to work with great people. And the older I get, the more I try to enjoy that. I think that's a little bit the silver lining for me. Just try to do some good thing with some good people. That's good. I think that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, no, and I think this is something like I think a bit young, like a good bit younger, but I'm trying to live it already now because I have heard this from Guy Spear when I was a guest on his podcast about sharing and creating stories, and I think you're saying something similar. And there's no reason to wait. I think you can start at any age, and the more you do it, the better
Yeah.
because it compounds and it doesn't cost you anything, right? It's just so you're essentially creating non-linear happiness, and you're letting it compound, and I think that's magical.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a way, and something that we hear a lot today, but I think it holds a lot of truth, is that enjoy the journey, right? Because if all you enjoy is the results, you're never going to be happy, man, because like there's always more, right? Like that's the problem with a result oriented culture, is that there's always more. Like when I make my first million, I'll do that. And guess what? When you're going to make your first million, the next target is going, when do I make 10, right? And
Right.
and not like I'm going to do that. So I think find the right balance. I'm all about ambition. I'm not about all that, but enjoy the ride. And that's why for me, it translates into you work with people, because ultimately the experience is what it remains. And the experience mean, yeah, there's a lot of experience you live on your own and do your own thing. But at work in particular, there's very little you can do on your own. I'm not a big fan of this whole thing like now you can build your own company on your own and then you have all these tools and you don't need anyone. It's freaking boring, man. Like if you're on your own doing your thing, like it's a bit like we're human, right? We're made to work together. So I think technology is great. Human better.
Yeah, and I think it makes me think of what someone said beautifully, which was the problem with a rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat. And I think
Yeah.
that's why it's not really, there is no value or satisfaction, I think, even if it works out, right? And that is sad. Like even, when you reach your goal and you're not happy, that's like,
Yeah. And that's what you see. And I mean, I'm still to meet anyone who has like financial title, whatever kind of goal in their life, and are happy when they reach it. It doesn't exist, right? Because there's always more.
correct.
Which is a great driver if you're ambitious, but it's also pretty depressing because you never succeed. Yeah, no, not the best way. I think there's better way of working.
Yeah, they agreed. And I think to sort of start out on the 6 steps, right, of
Yeah,
how we do these pods, to start with save, right? It's about avoiding sort of costly groupthink mistakes and, people sort of challenging orthodoxy, because what happens very often is, you tend to want to agree with people just to get things done. So it's easier. It feels more comfortable. And so, what have you seen across sectors or, within the product function that, what are your learnings in terms of, how you avoid and challenge groupthink and how you make sure that people end up not frittering away resources and kind of, preserve capital, preserve focus, preserve energy that they can then use for other things.
yeah, and I think it's an interesting question, and it's an interesting balance that you really need to work towards, right? Because you need, especially on this group thing, right? I was reading your book and I was like, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Like leveling up by the bottom is never a good thing, right? And we all know that's what happened. Like and there's some famous French songs from Georges Brassens. I'm not going to quote, but basically says like if you're more than a certain number, you're just a bunch of assholes. Translated in French, but there's truth in that, right? There's truth in like at some point, the more people you are, the dumber thing you're going to do. You put a bunch of people in a room, they're going to start doing dumb things, right? That's just who we are, right? And what we always say is that the weakest link is what basically level the whole team, right? If you have a weak link, that's the best you can do. So in products, it makes it a little bit tricky because I'm absolutely convinced that I'm the genius. I'm going to go in the garage. I'm going to turn out for 6 months and build a fabulous thing on my own and not talk to anybody about else because I don't want anybody to steal my idea and it's so good and all that. You're going to go nowhere, right? Like maybe 1% of the population is capable of doing that, but I doubt it. Like pure genius like that, it's pretty rare. Plus, you need context, you need things, you need. So I'm a big proponent of collaboration. I mean, collaborative leadership is extremely important. So when I build a product vision, it's not me going in a room and doing it on my own. It's working with the customer, with the market, with the different function, with my team. It's something you build together. I own it. I'm the product leader. I'm owning the vision ultimately, but everybody needs to be involved into defining it. So there's some aspect of groupthink here, but it's not groupthink in a way one person says one thing and everybody follows. It's groupthink in a way exchange and really respectful discussion and bringing different point of view to the table. I think that's extremely important, and that's your role as a leader to make sure that everybody has a voice, not only within your team but also the customer. Everything from what can you do legally, what can you do. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects you need to take into account, and that's included in the role of product management. The product manager is always someone who is talking to as many stakeholders as possible to get all the different aspects, de-risk everything, look at it from all different angles. So I think by nature, and that's what I am at heart, a product person is collaborative because there's no way one person can know everything in all areas. So I think it's finding this balance between collaboration but not groupthink, and I think that's not an easy one. And we see a lot of, and I think that's part of building a very strong foundation for a solid cross-functional product team. Is that I think being able to have this exchange of opinion, but ultimately it's not my idea or your idea or whatever that is the most important, is the idea that makes sense, is what really is going to solve the problem. So being able to encourage the people to have opinion, share their opinion openly, feeling in a safe space, but don't be attached to the opinion or to the idea, but just trying to solve the problem. So falling in love with the problem and working together on the solution. That's the role of product. And I think that's what I'm trying to do as much as possible when I join different teams. And you find based on the culture with the company, you will have to work on different triggers to make that happen. There are culture that are very risk averse and that limits the conversation. They are culture that are very hierarchic and nobody wants to talk. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles to be able to put in place this kind of safe environment of exchange and collaboration without, this pushed ownership and everything. I think is really where I'm spending a lot of time and what I like to do. And I've seen it working extremely well. So I think that's definitely something as a product leader is make sure that you bring everybody on the journey and then everybody has ownership of the direction we're going. Doesn't mean that as a product leader, you don't own the vision and you're not responsible for it, but you are the voice of a much larger team. And everybody needs to feel like they've been involved into that product vision, because then it becomes way easier to be motivated to deliver against it. So being able to find that is the growl for product leader. And I would expand that for a leader in general, right? I think that's really where you want to go. You want to make sure that you're the catalyst, not that that you're catalyst of a fruitful exchange, rubbing shoulder, and respectful discussion. And that's hard to do. That's very hard to do because that's not the normal way of operating for most companies that I've been in, right? There's always, we have all these animals, and I don't let them top of my mind. The highest salary, the highest blah blah blah, who are going everywhere and forcing their opinion. This is so old school and so irrelevant, because mostly the people generally the people with the biggest title are the people are the further away from the market, and they don't know anything. So the title doesn't entitle them to make the decision. That's very interesting mindset. And it's even more difficult to change that, as you know, in more traditional industry where hierarchy title is means a lot. And I think we need to pass that. And ultimately the most important is the customer, not any of the exec or whatever. Is the customer is the most important. So as long as you put the customer in the center, that a little bit depersonalize the conversation, right? At the end of the day, we're all here to make the customer happy. And if you keep that in mind, that makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think in traditional industries, people are more hierarchical and slower to adapt. I think because the clock speed is slower, like things just like product development cycles, especially when there's hardware or high components involved, it just takes longer. And so, or logistics are very complex or whatever. All these things take longer, and so that speed of being punched in the face by the market is just much slower, and so you can get away with a lot more. You can kind of believe your own illusion a little longer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the risks are bigger, right? If you're an install company, you have your customer for a long time, you have like change is more difficult than if you're just a newcomer and like you have nothing to lose, right? It's just like, let me change that and try this and try that. Being innovative when you are a traditional player is way more difficult. We need to acknowledge that. It's way more difficult. That's the way to go, but with the right balance, right? Because you have a lot more at stake than if you're like just a startup that is in seed phase and just like, yeah, you have something to lose. Always have something to lose, but not you're not a 900 or 1,000 people company with 900 families under your responsibility, right? It's a bit
Yeah.
it's slightly different. So
I-
also
I'm,
keeping that in mind is important.
yeah, no, totally. I mean, I'm glad you say this because this really leads to the next thing, which is that when you are an incumbent, a traditional player, yes, it's a lot harder to sort of, get nimbler. But when you do decide to do something, you have an incumbent advantage. You have a legacy advantage that a new player in the market won't,
Yeah.
right? Which means that when you try to when you go for the kill, right, you want to leverage your unfair advantages. When you go into battle, when you ride into battle, you want to make sure that, you take everything you already have and leverage that. And so that kind of really brings us to the next point, which is like, how do you think product leaders can leverage? So firstly, how should they even think about their unique unfair advantages, right? And how can they leverage them to increase their success rates and to also make use of what they already have, right? Without having to, like, there is no point in stripping yourself. If there's a startup in front of you that has nothing, you don't have to strip yourself naked
No.
to start fighting, right? If you have got a bazooka, fire it.
Yeah, of course. No. I mean, if you can squash that startup, do it. Right? It's like it's not a fair game out there. Like we're not fighting with the same arms, the same guns. Right? So I think it's important that, and it's a very good question. It's like know what you're good at, and I see too often people joining companies or leaders joining or whatever, and not taking the time to go out there, talk to customer, and understand, and asking the simple questions like, what are we good at? Like tell us, because it's not about me what I think I'm good at. It's about what the market knows I'm good at, what the customer buying from us. And there's a lot of different. It can be purely price, can be pure. So you could be the best at low price. You could be the best at something else. Like, and I think, and that's what I mean by playbook. There's no playbook, but there should be a big incentive for any new joiner to spend time with customer, to ask this simple question. It's like, what are we good at? What are we really crap at? Like, and does it matter? And I think if you don't do that exercise, you're completely missing the point. And I'm a big proponent of, let me rephrase that. I don't care so much about competition. I know what competition is doing. It's interesting. You look at what they are doing, but they are playing, it's almost a different game because they're different than you. They don't have the same, or they have a different cards set and all that. So it's interesting to look at what they are doing. It's way more interesting to look at how the market is responding to what they are doing, because I don't really care if it's company A, B, or C doing that. What I care about is like, does the customer value that? That's a very different approach. So I'm more interested into what the market wants, demand, and appreciate much more than what competitor A or B is doing. So ultimately, I think it boils down to customer intimacy and making sure that as a product and tech person, and I'm saying tech, like it's important. I think engineers should spend more time with customers, and I'm trying to force them to do that because ultimately, once you have building that empathy with the customer, you know what counts, what doesn't count, and you can start refocus your energy. And we all have limited resources, as your first question was saying. So for me, it's really like, how do you really leverage what you're good at? And I'm the same with people, right? I think, and it's getting more and more true, is that you much better being great at something, at a few things, than being average on many things. So if you're good at something, just keep on working on it because there's always going to be I'm going back to my collaboration. There's always going to be someone who is better at something than you. So just find collaborators and become the best at a couple of things that you're really good. And I think company can operate exactly the same. You don't have to be good at everything. Actually, the more successful product has a simple product that does one thing, but does it extremely well. And it's very interesting for me, if you look at all different products, is that generally they have a killer feature. There's something that really everybody loves. And that's probably why people use it. And then they try to replicate that and the product becomes messy and like it is a lot of things. And we see that in all the product we're using on a daily basis. And you're like, I don't need that, right? Like it's like, just keep it simple. And that's why for me, it's always, and I don't want to drift on something else. There's an interesting, there's still a question in the back of my head. I travel a lot and I spend a lot of in Asia, and I'm still wondering why in Asia you see these super app that do everything, and you don't see that so much in Europe or in the US, where it's more like one app for one thing, right? You go to China, for example, and you have apps to do everything, and then why? So it's a different mindset. And I'm drifting different conversation here, but I think that's an important thing to also. It talks to the fact, what do we do? What your customer really appreciate, and I'm mentioning that because if you are a worldwide company, if you take that example, like probably customer in Europe will appreciate one app, one function does one thing, where maybe customer in Asia would be like, no, you know what? I have this super app. There's my wallet in it. There's my music. There's my thing. I want everything in there. I want my insurance integrated with it directly. I want, and I'm like, okay, why not? Interesting. But like for me, for example, as a user, it's still very weird, or it's still not natural that I can order a car and food in the same app, right? It's like, all right, I see the logic,
Yeah.
but my mind is a little bit compartmentalized. So
I think
anyway, it's customer intimacy, and it differs from, and it's also my age probably. I guess my kids are probably thinking differently. But that's just a stupid example of customer intimacy. What am I good at? And why? And as a product person, it's always looking at. There are two things that are extremely important in every product. I think the first thing is the killer feature. So really the killer use case, the thing that you're super good at and you know what to solve, and really you can do it. And then there's the magic feature. Like the magic feature is this little touch of magic that you put in your product that makes the people come back and makes it, and sometimes it's very little, and it's hard to find, and could be in the design, could be in the UX, could be in anything, could be something very small. But I think that's the two absolutely thing that any good product needs to have. Killer feature to really solve a problem, and then a little bit of magic. And if you can do that, I guarantee you that you're going to be successful. So that's probably what I'm trying to focus on, is like, instead of looking, product tend to be very complex, especially in the B2B world. And I think, what is the killer feature of that product? I think that's very important to go back to the basics around that. And then you can build around that. But that's going back to first principle, right? Is like, ultimately having this very simple framework: one problem, one solution; one problem, one feature to solve it, or one workflow to solve it. I think that's the ground. That's where you want to be. Everybody wants simplicity.
it's interesting you say that, because what that leads to then is you say, okay, I focus on that one killer thing that I can do really well, which also means, like you said, you'd have to partner for other things with other people, whether internally or with other companies. And so to be able to do that successfully, you need to achieve alignment, right? Which kind of takes us to the next step, which is how do you get, because you can't do everything, but like when you do decide to do something and you work with more people, more resources, etc., how do you get everyone sort of, how do you unify organizational efforts, right, around a clear, impactful goal? And alignment is definitely a big challenge, right? And it's what also prevents successful scaling. So how do you think product leaders should align their teams, right, to achieve their goals?
Yeah, I think the first thing where it all starts is clarity on the direction, right? As we discussed before with Evan, like for me, the first role or the first responsibility of a product and tech leader is to define the direction. Is like, this is crystal clear. That's where we are going. You can call it product vision. You can call it North Star. You can call it what you want. Ultimately, you are giving the direction. You're guiding, leading, guiding. That's the direction. Why is it important? Because it aligns people around one hairy, ambitious goal. It has to be ambitious. It has to be hairy. Otherwise, what's the point of waking up, right? So clear vision. That's the most important thing. And you share that vision, as I mentioned before. You're not coming out of the woodwork like just like, oh, look, I went out for a month and I came back with this fantastic vision. No, you've been working with that and iterating with that with your fellow leaders, with your team, validating that with the market. It's a whole journey and it's a live document, it's a live statement. So the first thing is clear vision. Once you have clear vision, then I think your second role as a leader is to create an environment where your team can be successful delivering that vision. The vision tells you why are we doing what we are doing. Then you need to build a team and create an environment where they can successfully define what does it mean, what are we going to build, and when are we going to deliver that to the market and how. Right. So your responsibility is the why and the direction, and then you need to create an environment where your team can decide the what, the when, the how, and get it done. And you are here once they are in motion and you have agreed on what needs to happen. So this bottom up approach is, it's basically your role as a leader is remove hurdles. You're just here to remove hurdles. Hurdles can be anything. Hurdles can be a budget. Hurdle can be the question they have. Should we go left and right? At some point, you have to be the tiebreaker. A hurdle can be this message doesn't go through. Like we don't know how to get that to the sales team. We don't know, and so it's helping putting oil in the machine. But it's really the role is that's direction we're going. That give you the decision framework. That I create an environment with the right people can make the right decision at the right place where the knowledge is. Because forget the idea that as you're at the top and you know everything, that would be dumb. Create an environment where the right decisions are made by the right people at the right place, and then be there to remove the hurdles. I think if you do that, you create alignment. And then, of course, you put all that under a very nice set of metrics, starting with the North Star metrics that is fully aligned with your vision. And then you have what I call health metrics, both for the team and for the company, which are everything around your velocity, everything around the number of innovation you're bringing, basically just every type of metrics you can use to measure how you are working, not what you're working on, but how you are working. Your North Star is easier to prove that you are working on the right thing. And that's the most important thing. Before you start working, make sure you know what is the right thing to work on. A limited resource, limited time, make sure you work on the right thing, which brought us back to your previous question. The right thing to work on is the thing where you differentiate and you're good.
Very happy.
So it's all very logic, right? So you discover customer intimacy tells you what you need to focus on. And then from there, you create the environment with a very clear vision, very clear metrics, and then delegate decision at the right level and clarity. And you get out of the way, basically. I think leaders need to learn to get more out of the way. I see too many leaders wanting to be everything to everyone and being involved in everything. FOMO still exists. As a leader, your role is to bring on board a team that you trust and to hire people who are way more competent than you, which is difficult for certain people, right? Because it means you need to know what you don't know and to be cool with that. Like it's just like, okay, I'm not the best at it, but I know it's important. Let me bring someone who's the best at it and then help that person by creating the right environment and supporting them. I think that's the role of the leader. The leader doesn't have all the answers. And that's
Yeah.
not, if you hear what I say, I didn't tell you I have all the answer. I told you I'm going to help find the answer. And then when we have the answer, I'm going to help make sure we keep on track. That's your role. End of the story. I don't believe so much in genius who are capable of doing everything. I think they are out there. I'm not one of them, so I had to adapt.
No, totally. I think that makes so much sense. And I think once you found your differentiation and you leverage your strengths and focus everything on that, you align and you set the direction and you get your teams working and you essentially sort of, remove hurdles from their way. Um, one of the consequences of that is that, this kind of tacit or explicit problem solving, right? As you empower your teams and your people to move towards that vision, they will be problem solving, right?
Yeah.
And trying to solve things and fix things. And as that happens, that is the nature of how complexity is born, right? And so we had this discussion, right, which is that complexity is born bottom up, and no one wakes up in the morning and says, let's increase complexity. It's problem solving over time that ends up in complexity increasing and the cost of complexity increasing. And so for me, simplification, or making sure that you have some kind of error correcting mechanism to remove the growth of complexity, has to be an exact priority. And I think based on what you described, it is the consequence of that approach where you have to also keep in mind. So what are your thoughts on how product leaders should keep pushing through simplicity top down to make sure that things explode?
Absolutely. And I think you have a point. It should be almost the most important word. And I didn't take count, but I think something I'm repeating on continuous basis is focus, because we can't do anything. So I think being focused is extremely important. And of course you need to focus on the right thing, right? But I'm not the massive proponent of multitasking. I'm not a massive proponent of trying to solve too many things. I'm very used to join company where they have, when they run out of project or whatever, they start popping up strategic initiatives or this thing, or this thing. There's always, something that comes slot in, a new project, like whatever you call it, project, program, strategic initiative, secret project, whatever it is. Every single company have those. And what I like to do is I like to do an inventory of all of these. And sometimes you can't even do that because they are all over the place and they mushroom everywhere and everybody has a secret project or whatever it is. And it's not uncommon to talk about tens and tens on ongoing projects. And they are taking resources out, they're taking bandwidth out. And there's no way on earth you can have more than 5 top initiatives as a company, right? So it's always a good exercise to, as a leadership team, say, okay, how many strategic project, initiative, programs, transformation, whatever you want to call it, do we have running in parallel at the exact moment now? So just try to do that inventory. Already the exercise of doing the inventory tells you a lot, right? Because you will realize things are never closed, things keep on opening. It's becoming a bypass to a lot of things. So I think doing that exercise is very relevant. And because it becomes so painful to do a proper inventory, you realize something is wrong. So you don't have to convince people something is wrong. Like, just do the exercise. And it was like, and then you have the list. And if you come to a list that is over 10, 20, 30, I've seen in the 50s, right? But generally it's between 10 and 20, right? Every single company has this kind of thing running. It's way too many, right? Because you have to run your business in parallel to that. So I think a first good exercise is awareness of everything that is going on. So really doing the hardcore exercise of inventory. So you realize, then looking at what is this project, why do we have this shadow mechanism of creating so many strategic projects? And then it's just going through a forced prioritization of saying, okay, I get it. There needs to be some project program like that, but we can only afford 3 or 5. And then working towards doing that. So it's a very mechanical approach, but it helps a lot. And there are a lot of examples around that. Like, one good example is always, and maybe one that you live, is like when you do integration between 2 companies. There's 1 million things you can do and put under the umbrella of an integration. If you try to do like a whole shopping list of everything and the Chinese menu of everything you have to do for an integration, you don't move the needle. And you'll be in integration for the next 3 years, right? And then the next acquisition and you'll be in integration and all that. So I've seen that again and again and again. So I'm much more proponent of saying, okay, by that time, so time box it, by that time, we need to have accomplished this, and this, these three things, and then we will be in a better place from from an integration between two company perspective. And then we can move to the next level and the next level. I think slicing it down and keeping it very focused is extremely important, because also this strategic initiative and this, which is kind of the waste of focus and the weight of focus, is really taking a lot of energy. And I have seen very capable people being tracked and being put under pressure to deliver against projects that are not that relevant. So I think it's extremely, I would say first awareness and then drastic prioritization, because otherwise we all have limited resources, right? We can't do everything. It brings you back to, and there are simple frameworks you can use for prioritization. The first one is it aligned with a vision? Does it serve the vision? Is it going to help us? Right? Is it something we have to do now? Can we do it? So simple framework. The first one is it aligned with a vision? The second one is now, next, later. Like if we do it in, like I say, something needs to rot. Like if we do it in 6 months, is it a problem? Yeah, but not major. We still operate. So I think being able to take the pain and go through prioritization is a very good exercise, and one that I encourage everybody to do at every level of the company. It's not only at the company level. Like teams have a tendency to do that as well. I guess it's only human, right? We like lists of things and projects.
Yeah, I think what then could happen, right, at scale is that it's a bit like the blind man and the elephant, right? Because every person is sort of seeing their empirical reality, but which is kind of local to them. So, the blind guy sort of touching the elephant's leg thinks it's a tree. The person touching the tail thinks it's a rope, etc. And so as a product leader, I guess at that point, your job is to make sure everyone also understands that it's an elephant, right? And that there is, like, you want to make sure that their understanding of the environment they operate in is empirically valid, not just for their little reality, but overall. And so, how can product, because empowering teams and decentralizing, I think, has clear advantages, but then one, as we discussed, was simplification, which is to make sure that complexity doesn't go out of control. But the other thing is also optimizing in a consistent way, meaning you don't want, everyone sort of doing their thing in the corner, but overall it's not really a maximum, an optimum that you reach. So what are your thoughts on like how you can get people to optimize with a empirically valid view of the environment they're operating in?
Yeah, I think it boils down to, again, small increments, validation with the market, being very close, building product with customer, not for customers. I think is extremely important. So you get continuous market validation of what you are doing, so you don't operate in a bubble. I think is extremely important. Collaboration is also like cross-functional collaboration, what I was mentioning before. The age of the engineer being told you have to solve that, and that, without telling them the context, whatever, is gone forever. Like more engineers need to spend time with customers. It's not reserved to product manager or salespeople. Everybody needs to have a view directly with the customer, understanding from the horse mouth what's happening, because then they can apply their craft on a problem. They're not here to just do something in a vacuum. I think that's extremely important. I think you also need to, I think you have a fair point. You don't want to optimize with a certain standardization is the wrong word, but replicability of what you are doing. So I think being able to put in place some processes so that it's not the crazy jungle everywhere and nothing is replicable is very important. So every project would be slightly different, but if you put framework around that, like there's simple thing, right? There's simple thing that can have a very good impact. Like for example, having documented decision document in a company is it gonna sound like something a little bit, but just putting that plate, like a simple template, so that when a decision is made, everybody's using the same template. You have the rationale for the decision, the context and all that. And you just document that. Doesn't take, we're not talking literature, right? It's like, it's one page or a paragraph, whatever it is, but it's documented, it's there, and it's standardized across all the project. And I think that's the kind of thing, is just one example around many, but that's the kind of thing that is important. For example, make sure that whatever experience you're going to do, you're going to apply metrics to it so that you can actually measure, and it's objective. It's not a subjective thing. And of course, the metrics are going to be different from one project to another, but at least you have that mindset, that way of doing things where you say, whatever we do, we measure, we know what we say what we're going to do, we do what we say, we measure, and then we iterate. I think this kind of principle is enough standardization to make things replicable, to make things not going in all direction crazy, and then you're comparing pears and apples or whatever you want to call it, carrots. But I think that's an important one. Going back to the fundamental, like answering once again, it's the same thing. It's like, why are we doing that? How do we measure that we are doing the right thing? And making sure everybody understand that it goes, that the person or the receiver of the service or whatever it is part of the equation. Is always taking into account, so you measure the right thing. Let's avoid vanity metrics, right? This is like, it's useless. So
Yeah.
this kind of openness, limited standardization is what I would shoot for, and it's a balance. And there's no, it's not an art. It's as much a science. It's not a science as much an art as a science. But I think that's one that is important. Is making sure you have a few principles you apply across the board, and naturally it's going to be ingrained in your culture, right? If you do that on a regular basis, it's going to become ingrained in your culture, and that's going to standardize to the right level where you optimize and what you optimize.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. But also another challenge in traditional industries is this sort of scarcity mindset. So you look at, what resources do I have and what can I do with it? But you don't realize that, with digital and data-driven paradigms, you have replication costs that are essentially zero. You have decision-making or personalization costs that are tending to zero. And so you just have so much abundance out there in terms of what you can do and how you can delight your customers. So how do you get product leaders, especially in traditional industries, to think beyond their limited resources? How do you make them embrace the opportunities for growth through obsessing about demand, and also by shedding their scarcity mindset?
Yeah, I think once again, I feel like a broken record, but that's about understanding your customer. Ultimately, is that instead of striking your ego by delivering more feature, doing more thing, doing this, doing that, just measure the impact of what you are doing, right? And if you really measure the impact of what you are doing with the people you are doing it for, you will understand what it means. So growth for me is very interesting, because growth is in everybody's mouth. Everybody wants growth at all costs, right? It's like, and digital has only accelerated that, because digital has made, now you have chief growth officer, now you have growth everywhere. It has become a job. Like, growth has become a job, which to a certain extent is, I'm going to be a little bit non-politically correct. I just think it's a wrong job, because if a company is into growth, everybody should drive growth within their function. Like, there's no one owns growth, right? Because growth is going to be across every single function. So a growth officer for me is a bit of a weird animal, and I think it's a very temporary title. And we don't see it that much. I mean, there was a big wave, and then it's slowing down to some extent, but it still exists, especially in traditional industry. I think we still have that. I think in non-traditional industry, or more innovative, it's understood that growth is just through the metrics. Everybody's working toward growth, right? Growth is survival. You have to do it. I completely get it. So I think it's important to also understand what growth means, especially for traditional industries. And generally in traditional industry, you have an installed customer base. So the question is like, what type of growth do you want? You want market share growth? You want to eat your competition? You want share of wallet? You want to avoid, what is more important, avoiding churn or getting new customer? Or is growth within your customer base and the share of wallet more important than growth in new market? Because the approach is going to be completely different, right? You can dump a market and then dump the price, and then you get competition, but then your share, but then your profit is going down. So you always need to think about why. Just saying we want growth is not enough, right? You need to know what that means. And I think that's a little bit of a disease today of growth is assumed, but it's not specified. And for me, it's always very interesting. And especially in established industry, everybody is, I think there's an over talking about growth and new customer acquisition and all that. And people forget that the number one priority should be making sure your existing customers stay with you. Like, avoiding churn and delighting your existing customer is the foundation. because putting more water in the leaky bucket doesn't get anywhere, right? So I think that's crucial for me. That's why I think I'm going back to my point about define what growth means for you. What is feasible in a certain amount of time, where you want to try new things. Once again, being extremely customer centric is like getting new customers is difficult. So why wouldn't you spend a lot of time making sure the customer you have are happy? And especially in as we are talking a lot about traditional industry that are being challenged, transformed by new entrants, by all that. Like protect your crown jewels, right? It's like protect your crown jewels, like people who have been staying with you. And to close the loop here, the customer have been with you because there's something that you are doing really well. So go back to the beginning of our conversation, like hone on that. Like, don't be just good, be freaking great. Like, be the best at what you do. Spend a lot of effort on that. Grow in that area. And then I guarantee you, you're going to grow your share of wallet and you're going to eat competition. Because if you have these people who really value what you're doing, and if you're doing that even better, more people will see that. Word of mouth is going to go. Like, I think growth, there's 1 million way of achieving growth. And you need to deeply understand your market dynamic. You need to deeply understand your customer to really know what is the path that is going to be the most relevant for you towards growth. And I think there's a lot of talk around growth. And to the point that there is even a counter like a movement say growth is not everything. Like there's always this lifestyle kind of business where like it's not. I don't want too many customers. I just want the right number, and then I'll tag along. I'm not here to make millions. I'm just here to make a living and be happy with what I'm doing. So there's always this quality. So for me, when I'm not saying it's the right trend or whatever, all I'm saying is that when these kind of trends start to appear, like back to a lifestyle living, growth at all costs is not necessarily where we want to go. You need to ask yourself the question. I'm a big proponent for growth. I think growth is survival of company as you need growth, but be smart about it and label it the right way. Like go deeper, understand exactly what is the right growth for you, right? It's a little bit like product. For me, it's just like, there was an era of feature factories, like more feature, the more, the better. And now we're back to a real like, make sure you work on the right thing and do the right thing right? It's not about volume, it's about quality of what you are doing. I think we should take a similar angle around growth.
Yeah, the nice
Uh,
thing I think is what you've so beautifully sort of tied back growth as the last step of Slashdog with leverage at the start. And so you kind of close the loop and say, look, as you obsess about growth, you will discover even more like what your unique unfair strengths are and how you can leverage them. And so I think that sort of beautifully closes the loop, and which means, this kind of fits together, and like thinking of each of these steps is important. So
yeah.
yeah, that
No,
was just,
absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. Sorry to interrupt, Ritavan. And I want to say that I had the chance to work with you a few years ago, and when I saw you wrote that book, I wanted to read it. I read it, and I must say it's a very relevant. As I wrote in that post, it's a very relevant book because it's not about yet another like trendy kind of thing. AI is going to solve the world, and data is the new oil, and whatever you want to say, right? It's a pragmatic way, and it's relevant. Talks to me because I work now in maritime, and before that automotive. So as you say, pretty traditional industries. Although some of them have been more innovative. I think your book is absolutely on point, right? Is like this is what you have. This is your playground. What are the best way of doing that? And through this conversation we had today, I think the framework of Slashdog is 100% relevant, and is one that makes a lot of sense in our industries. Is just like you're established. You're not starting from scratch. You leverage technology to do better what you've been doing, but if you're still there as a traditional company, if you have customer, if you are still surviving, knowing how hard it is for a company to survive and to thrive, you are doing something great. Like there's something you're doing is good. So use Slashdog as the way I would say is use that framework to do what you're doing better. And everything will be fine, right? So it's a very pragmatic approach, which I think really shine in a time where everything is about yeah, the next rainbow and the next magical unicorn and all that. I think there is a beauty in the grinding. There is a beauty in taking an industry that everybody is looking down to and say like, no, look, they're doing something great, and we can help them do even better. I think that's the way I look at it. So very very optimistic about the success of this framework. And as I wrote, I will definitely use it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicola. I think I'm so glad our values align, and that, it's so important that traditional industries also thrive and that legacy businesses also succeed, because that we need them, and most of our life is like we still live in the physical world, and so
Yeah,
we need that to get better. It's not just if we can optimize software and attention capturing algorithms ad infinitum, but it's our real world is going to improve through traditional sectors and legacy
yeah,
businesses. So
100%. Working in maritime, 90. There's hundred of different numbers floating out there, but anywhere between, let's be large and say anywhere between 85 and 99% of any goods has been on a ship at some point in its life. So helping that industry improve around sustainability, around regulation, around safety, around everything by leveraging technology has a drastic impact on everything. And that's one example of an industry. You can take every single industry called traditional. They are the foundation, it's the scaffolding of our own society. And I think we spend too much time talking about the fancy logo and the fancy purely digital new thing and innovation. There are some of them still looking for a use case when there is a whole industry that is the tissue of our society that is working out there. So I'm personally very excited to work in this type of industry, and I think we're going to see more and more talent going in that direction, hopefully.
yeah, I can just say amen to that. Like, this is I truly hope that happens, and yeah, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much, and
Absolutely, likewise.
it was really great having you on Slashdog Leaders and Readers. So thanks for that, Nicola.
Thank you very much, Ritavan.
If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe on slashdog.substack.com and on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts. See you on the next episode.